All right, everybody. It's just a couple minutes after 5, so I'm going to get started while the rest of our attendees roll on in. My name is Sarah Carden, and I am the Senior Policy Advocate at Farm Action and Farm Action Fund. And I just want to start by welcoming you to the first in our webinar series, our Justice for All webinar. We are here today because our food and farm system has failed to support and protect and empower our socially disadvantaged communities, and the upcoming Farm Bill presents a tremendous opportunity to begin to correct and address these failures. We are lucky to have 4 terrific panelists from organizations we deeply respect, as well as Adam Zipkin, Counsel for U.S. Senator Cory Booker, here with us today. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of our agenda today. I will open the webinar and give some context and background for it. And then we'll hear from our 4 panelists about their work and the opportunities they see for centering equity in the Farm Bill. We have, in addition to Adam Zipkin, we have with us here today Lorette Picciano, Executive Director at Rural Coalition, Amy Tamayo, National Policy and Advocacy Coordinator at Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, Webb Davis, a Missouri farmer and Senior Policy Advisor at Farm Action, and Tambra Stevenson, Founder and CEO at WANDA, Women Advancing Nutrition, Dietetics, and Agriculture. Following our panel, Adam Zipkin will share some of the work he and Senator Booker have been leading in the Senate. Senator Booker and his office have proven to be not only leaders in this space, but they have done an amazing job of really comprehending the full picture and committing to a broad overhaul of our food and farming system. Following that, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, and then we'll be closing out. So we are here today to bring awareness to the opportunity that the Farm Bill presents. It is a mammoth piece of legislation that really creates the skeletal structure of our food system. And the way it's currently written, it puts corporate interests and profits ahead of everything else, including our health, our economy, our security, our environment, and our communities. With the next Farm Bill just around the corner, we see this as a huge opportunity to lay the groundwork for a farming and food system that supports everyone up and down the food supply chain, from farmers to workers to consumers. So this is really the founding basis of Farm Action's Fair Farm Bill campaign. Our Fair Farm Bill campaign is centered around 4 pillars. Many of you joined us in February when we co-hosted the Food Not Feed Summit, which is the first pillar of our campaign. And Food Not Feed focuses on the importance of a farm bill that empowers farmers to grow healthy, nutritious food, not just livestock feed crops like corn and soybeans, using regenerative organic production models for their communities. But our Fair Farm Bill campaign also has 3 other pillars: justice for all, build local, eat local, and conservation and regeneration. We have organized these webinars to bring attention and education around the context and the policies that are especially important to these other pillars. And to be clear, this is not an isolated campaign, and all of these pillars support one another. But the Farm Bill is this massive piece of legislation, so we've divided up the focus of these policies to help make it a little bit more accessible. And today, we are here to discuss the pillar Justice for All, and we'll be hosting webinars in the upcoming weeks on the other pillars. So Justice for All is a pillar that really focuses on centering equity in our Farm Bill. The USDA has an admitted history of discriminatory practices that have stacked the deck against socially disadvantaged communities. And as a result of these policies, we've seen brown and Black farmers driven off the land. Just to give you an example, in 1920, Black farmers represented 14% of farmers. Today, that number is less than 2%. Socially disadvantaged communities are also disproportionately affected by the effects of industrialized agriculture. So as it stands, current farm policy supports and prioritizes industrial models that leave our water, our air polluted, and our rural communities emptied. BIPOC communities have really been forced to disproportionately bear the burden of these negative externalities. Black and brown communities are also more likely to live in food deserts and have to have limited access to fresh and nutritious food, which is, as we touched on, for those of you who are able to join us at the Food Not Feed Summit, really directly related to our Food Not Feed campaign and our backward farm priorities. So it's also important to me to bring up that it's not only morally and ethically responsible to advocate for a farm bill that supports socially disadvantaged communities, but doing so is really critical to the vitality and to the resilience of our food and farming systems. This is an important way that we can introduce the diversity and resiliency into our food systems. It's also, BIPOC farmers are really leaders in the kinds of farming practices we want to be lifting up. They're more likely to be using diverse regenerative growing practices. A lot of the principles of agroecology, organic, regenerative farming are rooted in indigenous farming practices. And so supporting these farmers also means supporting our food system and our communities. So, you know, this is all great, but so what we're here today to do is to talk about, you know, how can we do this? What does a farm bill that centers equity really look like? So, you know, from where Farm Action is sitting, we have developed a platform where we're really focusing on building equitable access to USDA programs, investing in our BIPOC farmers and creating worker protections within the agricultural industry. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to give you a list of very specific recommendations that we at Farm Action are pushing in our Farm Bill campaign, as well as providing you with the information that you need to take action. Equity for us at Farm Action is a huge priority, but as an organization, we look to our BIPOC-led allies for guidance in this area, which is why I'm really excited to introduce to you some of the panelists that we have here today. They represent many of the organizations that we turn to for guidance in these areas. And so they bring a huge amount of experience, and we wanted to make sure that we could help provide them with a platform to share with you some of what they've shared with us. So that has helped us shape and guide our policy development. Some of the issues that they are going to discuss may not be exactly in our lane, but as our allies in this fight for a fair farm bill, we are really honored to support their work. Now, before I turn it over to them, just a couple housekeeping issues for those of you who are not familiar with the Zoom webinar format. You'll notice we don't have like the same chat function you may be accustomed to. We are going to be doing a Q&A at the end. So you'll see an icon on the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. I'm going to encourage all of you to ask questions through that at any point during the webinar, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. Alternatively, if you want an opportunity to ask your question in person live, then if you click the raise hand feature, when we get to the Q&A, I can call on you and take you off mute and give you an opportunity to ask your question. And so with that, I am going to start by turning it over to our first panelist, Lorette Picciano of Rural Coalition. So Dave, you want to unmute Lorette? Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you for having this panel, and thanks to everyone who's here. We're looking at this farm bill right now as both an opportunity, and there's also dangers. And as you know, over the last couple of years, you probably heard about all the things that were in the American Rescue Plan, largely due to the efforts of Senator Cory Booker and other leaders, Senator Raphael Warnock and others. We had debt relief, and we had other benefits to go to farmers who don't get any other kind of aid. And we faced direct lawsuits by some of the former inhabitants of the last White House, and on the whole definition of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and whether we are doing racial preferences. There's a lot more attention to these matters. These folks are still around, and there's always a danger that anything you try and do can head towards a Supreme Court. So we're in a new era. We're also in an era where the farmers need help more than they ever have before. So part of what we're going to need to do in this farm bill is protect. We're going to need to protect the set-asides and all the things, the cost share, higher cost shares, and all the benefits that we've won over the previous farm bills. In this one, we're going to have to be very careful about how we, make sure that socially disadvantaged Black farmers, Hispanic farmers, Latino farmers tribal farmers don't lose out if all these definitions change and we have more nesting. I want to go through a couple of other things. What we have also accomplished is in the Inflation Reduction Act, there was $2 billion for discrimination relief, and that's a process that hasn't yet opened up to go back many years for farmers who never got the correct kind of settlements. And then there's also a debt payment portion that had more billions of dollars in the Inflation Reduction Act. As we go into this farm bill, what we also have to do is make sure those funds don't get pulled back by somebody to be used as an offset or a match, because they're not all spent yet. And so that's another thing we're going to have to vigilantly watch for, plus a tax on any of the definitions that we may have. Also, in the IRA, and I think it also was in the American Rescue Plan, the Equity Commission at USDA was formed, and that commission has been working for a couple of years and has just put out an interim report. And we're going to look at what else we need to do to get those findings on equity put into law, and statutory changes and administrative changes made. Then a couple of the new things that we're going to be looking at, we really need to have more justice on county committees. And, we've talked about that a lot. I know in the Justice for Black Farmers bill that Senator Booker has led up with, there is kind of a Civil Rights and Oversight Commission. We're also wanting to look at making sure that socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers who would not be just a socially disadvantaged advisor, but that they could be appointed as voting members of the county committee, because until more people get inside those committees, we're never going to break up the old boy networks that have stood in the way of farmers getting what they need to get in farm programs. And, giving them direct access to the administrator, making public data on county committee elections. When we were going into litigation, we were oftentimes missing data. It was very hard to say how, to come up with the evidence, like, well, how many, discrimination claims were there and so forth. And so we need a lot more data on participation in the county committee elections, who gets elected. But not only that, we need a lot more data in lending. We are also working on a credit package. And again, there's also some things in Justice for Black Farmers, and we have a couple of other ones that we're looking at to modernize farm credit, to take away some of the term limits and barriers, to reduce the experience requirement to 1 year or no years. That's kept farm workers seeking to be farmers out of the programs. And so we'll have a whole set of the credit pieces that we need to do, and then also making sure that the farm credit system starts finding ways to obey the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, including, using the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau process to monitor, to actually process civil rights. There currently isn't a process. I also want to talk for a minute, because I know there's not much time, on climate. There's a lot of things happening on climate. There's a lot more money that was in Inflation Reduction Act on climate. We want to make sure that there are set-asides and that money goes to farmers and ranchers. But also, if we're going in the direction of climate markets and all the big industries getting involved, what we're finding is there are people coming to all of our communities, and Rural Coalition represents BIPOC farmers all over the country. They're buying up land everywhere. And so there was a land tenure study, and the issue of heirs property is still very important, but we don't even know, how much farmland is held in undivided interest, which is called heirs property in an estate. And we also don't know how much is held in absentee ownership. There's a lot of interest in foreign loan ownership, but the ranking minority on Senate Ag just said a couple of days ago that he's also concerned about the hedge funds and the teachers' funds that are buying up land, because we can't build the next generation of farmers if they don't have any land. So getting the land tenure study expanded and done is really important. We'll also be, and you can reach us at www.ruralco.org. We're also working on an agroforestry bill. and a title to help to deal with forest fires that some of the producers out, the indigenous producers and largely Latino producers out in the West have, where things are burning down, and also protection of forestry, farm and food workers from industrial agriculture. And I think some of my other colleagues will say more about that in the subsequent series. And then finally, we're actually hearing from some of the Republicans. They would like there to be a list for farmers to get of what are all the programs available. And we've been saying that for years. We got receipt for service approved and made mandatory in the 2014 Farm Bill. That needs to be extended so we know what the farmers are offered and what they're given, because many times farmers go into the office and it's like they have another set of programs and they don't hear about the things that should be available to them. But that also is data that we need. And then finally, we want to know in what month did they receive the loan, not if they received it in 30 days, if they received it at the end of the planting season. And also, how many programs do most farmers get into, and how many programs do people of color farmers get into in each county, so that we can better monitor what's happening. There's a lot of different things. I'm just pulling out a couple of them, and I'm going to turn this back over to my colleagues. Thanks so much for listening, probably too fast.
Thank you so much for sharing, Lorette. I always love hearing you talk and get a pen ready every time. So thanks again. Next up, we're going to hear from Amy Tamayo of Alianza. If you want to take the mic and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, everyone. My name is Amy Tamayo. I'm with Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, or the National Alliance of Farm Worker Women. And I'm here to share a little bit about our farm worker women's priorities under the Farm Bill and related policy. Historically, farm workers have not been included in the Farm Bill and have been intentionally and systemically excluded. This means that farm workers, especially women, continue to face exploitation and abuse that remains invisible to many policymakers. So we see the 2023 Farm Bill as an opportunity to raise awareness and to address some of these farm worker concerns, and to specifically raise some of the issues that farm worker women face. There are roughly about 2.5 million farm workers that do not have the minimum protections in the workplace, and they're often not shielded from retaliation, preventing them from making reports on or making complaints or reporting in the areas where they do have protections. There are a lot of health and safety concerns. There's a lot of race and ethnicity and gender discrimination, and there are a lot of wage and hour and overtime concerns. So for us, the conversation always starts with what makes this community the most vulnerable. There are a lot of things, but one of the biggest is that a lot of farm workers don't have a permanent or citizenship immigrant status, which we think really has to be at the core of our conversation because of how many farm workers are part of the food system. The most recent NAS report estimated that about 44% of the farm workers in the US are undocumented, which is an extremely high number, making this a core issue for this worker population. One of the US's largest states, California, or agricultural states in California, estimates that about 75% of their farm worker population is undocumented, which also raises a lot of concerns about the type of vulnerabilities and exploitation that they're facing. This really creates an imbalanced power dynamic in the workplace. It really prevents farm workers from speaking out against poor working conditions, pesticide exposure, heat exposure, gender-based violence, which we hear of a lot from our rural and farm worker communities. We hear that the majority of women either face sexual assault, harassment, or know someone who has faced sexual assault or harassment. Some of the retaliation that we hear from folks is that there is a lot of blacklisting for folks who make a complaint. They might not be fired that season or that year, but they might not be rehired the following year. And this is especially common with the H-2A program, making it really difficult for some of the workers in that program to raise any sort of concern because they're afraid that they won't have their visa renewed for the following year. Some of the concerns for the workers in the US that are not on the H-2A visas is even deportation. Some are afraid to even file a wage complaint for unpaid wages because of the fear of deportation. For women, this is especially difficult because we hear from a lot of farm worker women that their wages are not even paid to them at all, but are paid to their husbands, for example, or often their wages are included in paychecks for a male family member. So sometimes women go without any sort of compensation for their labor because they're afraid to speak out against that type of discriminatory form of payment. And for women who find themselves in like a domestic violence situation, it's really hard for them to have the resources to leave or to care for their children if they need to, because they don't even have access to their wages. So that is just another level of control that farm worker women have to deal with. And, you know, minors and children also suffer from similar forms of exploitation where their wages are often not paid to them, and they have limited education or resources on knowing how to advocate for themselves. In terms of some of the asks that we're making is to really raise awareness on how our intensive agricultural system is affecting through the agrochemical exposures is affecting the safety and health of workers. We have a lot of farm workers who claim that the exposure gives them like rashes on their skin, permanent allergies, respiratory conditions, and this is affecting folks who might not specifically be working in the field or the nurseries, but might be living in areas where it's a farm worker community and their children are developing respiratory conditions. Their water sources are not safe to drink or shower. A lot of the water is being found, when it's tested, it's being found that there's mercury or sometimes even lithium in the water. So this really raises a lot of concerns for folks living in rural areas and for farm worker communities that need to maybe live in that community because that's where their family members work. And we see this being a bigger issue with H-2A workers who are often afraid to even make an OSHA complaint, or because OSHA has a 30-day like statute of limitation by the time they get back to their home country, they usually miss that time frame, or they don't have the support in Spanish to do it over the phone. And so I just gave like an overview of all of the concerns, but how are some ways that we're centering farm workers in the Farm Bill is that we're trying to uplift workers without necessarily addressing immigration reform. And some of that is in the nutrition title, is requesting that SNAP eligibility not be based on immigration status, that farm workers have access to more information, resources to build cooperatives or to access land to transition into beginner farmers, and to encourage CBOs to have the resources to own land that farm workers can access without having to go through FSA loan requirement processes that sometimes have experience requirements. We're also uplifting the ask for more worker protections, whether that be through pesticide regulation or pesticide elimination. We're asking for more research to be done on risk assessments on the pesticides being used in worker communities or in workplaces. Sometimes we don't have enough data to ask for policy changes because we don't know what exact impact is, and a lot of workers don't know what the impact is on their bodies and find out when it's much too late and they're already battling cancer or some sort of permanent disease. And so we're also encouraging more interagency collaboration for rural development to address some housing, water, and air quality issues, and for the USDA Farm Worker Coordinator role to be strengthened so that they can actually have engagement with farm worker communities and do some outreach and community education that would really serve our farm worker communities. And I'll leave it there. I'll pass it back to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy. And now we always appreciate, I'm so touched that you all joined us. I'm really enjoying everything y'all are saying. And I'm going to ask Webb Davis, Missouri farmer and senior policy advisor at Farm Action, to unmute and take the stage.
Hello. Thank you. And I appreciate everybody being here today. I'm Webster Davis, Senior Policy Advisor at Farm Action. Farm Action is a thought leader, policy developer, and network builder for farmers and ranchers, food chain workers, consumers, organizations, and policymakers. I'm a member of the Council on Agricultural Research, Extension, and Teaching for Lincoln University of Missouri. I'm the chairman of the state of Missouri NAACP Agriculture Committee. I've been involved in the fight for equality of opportunity in agriculture since I was a child. My father and Joe Maxwell's father raised hogs within 30 miles of each other. My father was offered less for his hogs due to the color of his skin. This was the 1970s and the local cell bonus in Mexico, Missouri. My father had to take a stand on this issue, and I learned from the experience. When the first Morale Act of 1862 created the land grant system in universities by providing land for states to fund university, the thought process was good. Then racism reared its ugly head. The century-old battle of proper funding of 1890, historically Black colleges and universities, goes back to the Second Morale Act and continues to this day, approximately 130 years. We have renewed hope because of the friendships, collaborations, and relationship building that we've all engaged in. Making the plans, meeting with congressional leaders, and working social media for all it is worth is the beginning of our work. We must continue to counter those who hold the power to limit the food choices of this and future generations. It is time to end the 1890 land grant matching requirements and other impediments that states and the federal government use to skirt the issue of properly funding the education and resource that these institutions need to serve our communities, state, and federal and national constituents. Just as injustice anywhere results in injustice everywhere, progress anywhere has lifted the whole of mankind in some way, form, or faction. We must somehow make 1890 colleges and universities underfunded a well-known fact, not only in the academic world, but also in the court of public opinion. The political side of this issue must never lose sight of the emotional cost of this issue. There are students, farmers, and citizens that would benefit if we ensured that this issue is truly and finally resolved. The 2023 Farm Bill presents an opportunity for the efforts on behalf of Black, Indigenous, people of color farmers to bring to light their efforts and plights that they have faced in many different arenas. To include education, not only the basic education of agriculture, but also the larger education that covers their contribution to this nation's agricultural history. The return on investment of U.S. agricultural research and extension is $20 for every $1 invested. Yet federal support for NAFA, agricultural research, education, and extension has been flat in real dollars, resulting in destabilization of the very system the U.S. relies on to cultivate U.S.-based agricultural leaders, reinforce domestic preparedness, and ensure the U.S. leadership in global food security and technology. The data is in. The information proves itself. We must insist upon equity in the making of the 2023 Farm Bill, and we must anticipate that there will be a tax on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is the same thing that has happened in the past, and these threats against SNAP will happen in the future. Our goal remains the same: achieve equity in the marketplace and the education arena, and the next generation will have a solid platform upon which to build. Patience will not win out when the unpaid funding and the USDA waiver program allow states to avoid ensuring that the 1890 land grant issue goes unresolved, or when universities are told to use their endowment funding to make up for a shortfall caused by the state governments refusing to make 1890 universities whole. This requires paying the money that has not been paid since the 1890 one-to-one match program has been in existence. We must understand that part of making these issues whole is to create an environment where the outreach workers and extension agents have knowledge of market opportunities for the farmers and ranchers they are paid to help, such as how to penetrate the farm to school program locally, regionally, and nationally. All pillars of the Justice for All section of the Farm Action Farm Fair Bill Toolkit are important. Ensuring that the next generation benefits from all efforts requires that the 1890 land grant match issue is resolved. Everyone deserves a chance to succeed, but the USDA is admitted to discriminatory practices against marginalized farmers. We will all benefit in a fair and inclusive society, so we need to make credit accessible to all, ensure robust representation on government boards and commissions, and direct funding to organizations led by members of disadvantaged communities that provide technical assistance. I urge everyone to talk to the local USDA office and county committee, participate by voting, and working towards an active membership role. USDA is standing up the first ever FSA county committees focused exclusively on urban agriculture. These new committees are part of the USDA's effort to better support urban agriculture and will consist of 3 to 11 members. We must seek out opportunities to make our voices heard, and our combined efforts will bring justice for all.
Thank you so much, Webb. And our final panelist is going to be Tambra Stevenson.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I want to start off by just sharing who I am and why is WANDA a part of this important movement to help transform for a better food system. We take an intersectional lens at WANDA in understanding that in order to heal our communities, we have to empower our women and girls who really embrace our food ways that can heal ourselves, but also our communities by becoming those healthy food leaders and entrepreneurs and those who advocate for the healthy food policies that our communities desperately need. As someone who today marks the birthday of my father, Calvin Coolidge Hill Jr., who was a firefighter in Oklahoma City Fire, but also the day that Dr. King was assassinated, I reflected on what both of them had in common, which was a love of humanity. And I want to remember both their lives today and how we can turn their pain into purpose-driven policy through this farm bill that reflects a food system that values all of humanity. As someone who's a 5th generation Oklahoman, whose family in the eastern part still manages livestock and are ranchers and cattlemen, this work is not only personal, but professional, having lost my grandparents to heart disease, to diabetes, to stroke. And it was that curiosity of how did they die from these preventable lifestyle diseases that propelled me to study nutrition at Oklahoma State University, public health at Tufts Medical School, and now a PhD at American University, now that we see how health information runs rampant with no gatekeepers in the social media landscape. And so it was critical for me to think about how do we silo smash food, agriculture, nutrition, and health into a system that truly centers nutrition security. If anyone read the most recent Washington Post, we have Lunchables as a form of food security. But for anyone trained in nutrition, we know it is not the standard that we would feed our own children. Even USDA says that half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables. Here in my own community of Anacostia, less than 18% of intake of fruits and vegetables are even being consumed in my own community. We don't live in simply a food desert, it's a food apartheid because it's one that is structurally created, enacted by policies and reinforced by capitalism. As someone who's been a former born national security scholar coming from the heartland, I truly believe that food should be a democratic birthright and represents our power and our freedom to grow food, to heal not only us, but the planet and participate in a food democracy that fundamentally shapes and reflects our values. Over time, I've realized that this shift that we've seen in our food and healthcare system begins to redefine what our values are, taking a Band-Aid approach to policy that ultimately every 5 years we're in the same position. And that is why I believe that we need a food bill of rights. Back in February, Senator Booker shared at the Food Not Feed Summit that we're suffering from not only a nutrition, but health crisis that's preventable and completely avoidable. And if we simply just muster the public will and leverage the policy, the public as well as private sector, what would it mean to have a farm bill that improves not only the health of people, planet, but our livelihoods? And that is America adopting a food bill of rights that can guide agencies, state and local food policy councils, and organizations that are working at the intersection. Because ultimately, it is the ideology that is the fundamental foundation of all of this that drives in how we think about policy, who should have access to food. Food is power, it's identity. Food can kill us, it can heal us. But if we truly want a high performing workplace, a productive citizenship, we must begin to center food in this way. And that's why WANDA, as well as countless organizations and food citizens, are signing on and understanding that justice for all is America adopting a food policy that is a food bill of rights, because it centers a food system that is about nutrition security and health, that leads us to healthy Americans. And ultimately, nutrition security is national security. And so with that, I hope that we remember those lines during the midst of the pandemic of hungry Americans waiting at the food banks in this country. The pandemic revealed this pervasive food and nutrition security that we have. In my own home state of Oklahoma, 1 in 4 grows food insecure every day. And so we are grappling with a problem that has shaped a system that has been fragmented and unstable for quite some time, that we are inheriting, we're passing on to our children. But I hope today we say no more. That with this farm bill, that we begin to truly transform it to the future of food that we believe that we deserve, that we're worthy enough of having, that we exemplify what we believe a democratic society does when it values all of humanity. You can learn more and sign on at iamwanda.org/food bill of rights. Thank you so much.
Tambra, what a really great way to bring this all together and just bring in the bigger picture. I really appreciate it. So with that, we are going to open up, give Adam Zipkin some space to share with us some of the work he and Senator Booker have been leading on.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to the panel. I'm really honored to be here speaking about the work that Senator Booker and our office are doing. I was with Senator Booker when he was Mayor Booker in Newark, New Jersey, and our sort of first experience with the food system there was seeing how broken it was for low-income communities, Black and brown communities in Newark, where residents just did not have access to healthy foods. They didn't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and all of the harm that caused, the explosion of diet-related diseases, the obesity rates, the diabetes rates, and all of the other diseases. And coming to the Senate and then working on the 2018 Farm Bill, we were able to travel and meet with farmers in New Jersey and around the country, and sort of that experience, as well as what we saw during COVID, where, you know, sort of the fragility and a lot of the problems with our food system in terms of the treatment of workers and so many other things were exposed. You know, the realization that we had was just that the whole system was broken in so many ways, broken for independent family farmers, broken for the environment, broken for workers, as we heard, you know, farm workers, as well as broader food system workers, meatpacking workers. It's broken for rural communities. And so Senator Booker has introduced sort of a suite of bills that would comprehensively, fundamentally reform and change our food system. The Farm System Reform Act, which among other things would put a moratorium on new large factory farms and phase large factory farms out over time. Comprehensive legislation to protect meatpacking workers, legislation to ban some of the most toxic pesticides that are, you know, harming all of us, and in particular our farm workers, and the Justice for Black Farmers Act, that was an attempt to comprehensively address the terrible history of discrimination, the well-documented history of discrimination by USDA against Black farmers. And that bill had sort of a number of sections to it where It would put reforms in place within USDA to sort of once and for all try to end discrimination from happening against anyone. And it would create a new land grant program to restore the land base that's been lost by Black farmers over the last century. In 1920, there were nearly 1 million Black farmers. Today, we know there's less than 50,000, and there's been a loss of millions and millions of acres of farmland and the generational wealth that that land represented. And so the bill would attempt to sort of restore some of that land base by creating a land grant program for Black farmers and aspiring Black farmers. The bill would create sort of access to credit for Black farmers and other socially disadvantaged farmers, and do that in sort of multiple ways, along with debt forgiveness and a foreclosure moratorium. And then the bill also had some broader systemic reforms that would help not just Black farmers, but all small farmers. And we're sort of, I think Senator Booker recognizes that some of the biggest pieces of these bills are going to be a long fight that he's committed to in terms of the coming years, and taking a sort of multiple farm bill approach to fundamentally changing the system. But that said, the approach to this farm bill is sort of how can we start to make significant progress in doing that? What's the art of the possible in this farm bill? I think that big picture wise, really all of our work is equity centered work. And I think sort of some of it everyone would recognize as equity focused work, which is sort of directly focused on equity. But then the other pieces that we're working on, the other bills, the other reforms that we're pushing are indirectly equity work as well. And I'll explain what I mean as I go along, but I'll start with the sort of direct equity work, So last Friday, as a lot of you know, the Agriculture Committee in the Senate, all the offices had to submit their priorities, and Senator Booker submitted over 50 priorities. So we have a long list of what we're hoping to get into this farm bill as it moves forward. On the sort of direct equity side, as was mentioned by Lorette, sort of one top priority is sort of defending the money that's in the Inflation Reduction Act. There's money in there for tens of billions of dollars for conservation programs, and there's $3 billion for distressed farmers. But as mentioned, there's also $2.2 billion for farmers who have suffered discrimination to sort of start to take a step towards justice for those farmers and giving them financial assistance. And so sort of protecting that money along with the SNAP cuts and other things that we know there's going to be a tax on is a top priority. Sort of pulling out as much as we can from the Justice for Black Farmers Act and getting that into this farm bill. So the reforms at USDA and the credit reforms and other things, addressing what Webb Davis was highlighting, the sort of disparity in funding and treatment of 1890s when compared to 1862s is another priority. Providing mandatory funding for the socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher policy center at Alcorn State, and then sort of farm worker focused, protecting, so the legislation that Senator Booker has introduced that would ban some of the most toxic pesticides, where we recognize the political reality that there's not likely to be bans in this farm bill of those pesticides, even though they are banned in a lot of other countries and the science is really clear of how harmful they are. But what we do want to do in this farm bill is protect the rights of local communities to ban those pesticides, so that there can still be progress made as we still keep working for federal bans. There should be mandatory reporting of pesticide exposures to farm workers. There's other sort of farm worker focused procurement that we should be making progress on in this farm bill. So that's some of the sort of direct equity provisions that we're going to be making a big push that Senator Booker is going to be prioritizing in this farm bill. But then the indirect work that we're doing, sort of the other buckets of legislation that the senator is pushing are really focused on helping small farmers. But we know that when we help small farmers, even if we're doing it in a race neutral way that's not focused on Black farmers or socially disadvantaged farmers, we're still disproportionately helping Black farmers and other socially disadvantaged farmers. And so, as I mentioned, in the Justice for Black Farmers Act itself, Senator Booker has a series of reforms to the Packers and Stockyards Act to try to just level the playing field and allow small farmers to better compete, because we know that the vast majority of small farmers, of Black farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers are small farmers, and so they'll benefit from that. We have sort of a massive scale up of the GusNIP program as just a top priority. And some of you may know what the GusNIP program is, but it allows for some SNAP participants to receive either double bucks to purchase fruits and vegetables or produce prescriptions. And it's a really important program for people in Newark and other food deserts to get access to fresh fruits and vegetables. It's an important way to try to address the nutrition crisis and the explosion of diet-related diseases, but it's also a really important program for small farmers. If we could really scale up the GusNIP program, it provides markets and buyers for small farmers to know that if they grow fruits and vegetables, that they'll, right now, everything in so much of the Farm Bill is targeted to providing a safety net and subsidies for farmers to grow commodity crops like corn and soy. But if we start to really scale up programs that incentivize farmers to grow fruits and vegetables, then we know, they'll respond to that. And we've seen examples, and Senator Booker held a food as medicine focused hearing where we heard from farmers in New York and Kentucky about just how transformative programs like this are, not just for the recipients, but for the farmers as well. And there's also sort of reforming federal checkoff programs where you have small farmers very often paying into these programs and then the dollars being used in ways that work against their interests. We have some legislation to reform some of the conservation programs, including the EQIP program, in ways that they would better serve small farmers, which will disproportionately help, socially disadvantaged and Black farmers. And then we're working on crop insurance reform to try to get more specialty crop farmers, more small farmers, more farmers who have not been covered before to be able to benefit from the crop insurance program. So, there's a lot more to our long list of submissions, but I know that we want to leave some time for Q&A. So I'll kind of stop there and just, reiterate that I think that sort of the growing movement that is represented by this panel here and by the work Farm Action's doing and the Food Not Feed Summit, it really is changing the conversation here in Washington, and I think giving us the opportunity to make significant progress in this Farm Bill. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. I really, you guys are such leaders in this space, and I just want to reiterate how impressive it is and how excited we are about your full picture approach to this. And one of the reasons we really wanted you to join us here today. I want to invite all the other panelists to turn their videos back on so we can start, do a Q&A with the time we have left tonight. We have a couple questions in the queue, and anybody else who would like to throw some questions into the Q&A or would like to raise their hand and ask them, just let me know. I'm just going to work through them in the order we have, and we'll get to as many as we can. So the first question we have is here, let me just help with little technical issues over here. How can the Farm Bill address immigration issues? Those are not under USDA. Should there be a new title on farm worker issues? Amy, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I can get us started. So Alianza's perspective is that, there are many ways that we can advocate for undocumented, underdocumented, or H-2A farm workers without the explicit ask for immigration reform, which we know could create a jurisdictional conflict. Some of the ways that we're doing that is by asking like looking at the requirements for some of the programs in the Farm Bill that require a specific immigrant status to be eligible for that, or asking for that to be eliminated or to be, you know, reworded so that folks are not excluded from some resources and programs. One specific example would be the SNAP program. If you're undocumented, you can't get those benefits. And if you're being sponsored by someone else who does have, you know, citizenship or LPR status, if their income is a certain amount, then the whole, you know, you're also not eligible. So those are some ways that we can like uplift some of those folks without necessarily asking for immigration reform. Some other ones are access to like loan. I know that there's a lot of requirements that completely block farm workers from being able to apply due to immigrant status. And so thinking of creative ways where they can access land without necessarily having to buy it themselves, whether that be done through a cooperative, through a community-based organization, and also asking for research to be done in the community on like health impact and health assessments that show specifically what is causing the fertility issues, the respiratory issues in our communities, so that, you know, mobile clinics and things know exactly what to come and address and serve folks on, because a lot of undocumented folks don't have health insurance or are not able to access some services, or are afraid to access services because they don't want to give personal information when they go to clinics. So I think those are some of the ways that we're advocating for that. When we have conversations with folks on the Hill, we are also very vocal that we do need comprehensive immigration reform, because we know that if, you know, we're not having the conversation at all, then it's not being talked about. But, you know, we encourage any sort of legislation that is modifying, you know, immigration to be introduced and considered alongside the Farm Bill. That would be great. And that could also help avoid a jurisdictional pitfall. And another is like not supporting any bills that is looking to expand the H-2A program. That is something that would uplift the immigrant communities in the US, and also not expand a program that is using a temporary work visa instead of addressing the immigration reform issue. But I don't know if Lorette or someone else wants to add to the question.
Thanks, Amy. We have just a couple minutes, so I just want to try to work in a couple questions. We have another question. How can we get people to help back all these wonderful programs that Adam just mentioned that he and the senator have put forward? And I'm going to open that up. I think any of you, Adam, if you want to jump in, but everybody. Lorette, you want to start?
Well, Adam, I'm sure you have a lot of ideas too, but I think what we're going to have to do is, you know, to be working with Senator Booker and also, you know, the members on the other side, and to start campaigning. We've done sign-on letters and calls and, you know, meetings with all the members, first of the committee, and later with all the members that represent that represent your communities, because it's going to have to be a loud voice to move these pieces forward, especially all the equity related things. And Adam, I hope we don't have to wait 5 farm bills. This is my 9th farm bill, and you know, but I really think there are things that we can do in this farm bill. So take it one piece at a time, and yeah. And join up.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and if you're not on the list, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think for people out there that want to get involved, I think, you know, getting involved with organizations, right, that are advocating for these issues, like the organizations that are represented here and others, is one way. And also just, you know, whoever your individual member of Congress is, whoever your congressman or congresswoman is, whoever your senator, you know, is, reaching out to their office and asking them to co-sponsor bills and to support bills. I think, you know, it's an underestimated part of the process that really is important, because, you know, the offices, if they start to hear from their constituents in large numbers, it impacts their decision-making. So I think those are some of the ways that just everyone can get involved.
Thanks, guys. And this might be our last question. It's a bigger picture question that I would, you know, love to hear from a few of you all on is, what does improving equity do for the food system overall? If farm workers are protected and fairly paid, if BIPOC farmers have equal access to land and equal ability to shape policy, what does that do for all Americans?
I'm happy to take that on.
Thanks, Tambra.
When we think about equity, it's about a shift of power and resources. And if we call ourselves a superpower and a model of democracy, as the most recent Summit for Democracy happened last week under President Biden, we must be that example that we want others to model. And so equity understands that we have a lot of wrongs in the history of this country and even contemporarily. And so if we truly believe that everyone should have a seat at the table, that's what equity begins looking like. My belief, if we are not able to have a seat at the table, I encourage everyone to build their own table factories and produce your own tables, because ultimately that's how we have to correct those wrongs. And finally, when we think about equity, if people are not having a seat at the table and being a part of creating a better food system, this is how we have high unemployment rates. This is how we have high health inequities, where people are having premature death and going to the graveyard sooner than they should. And ultimately, we are not maximizing the full potential of all Americans to rise to meet the mission and really to hold these truths to be self-evident. Is that truly American?
Thanks so much, Tambra. So I think on that note, we are going to run out of time, and I'm so sorry. We have a great queue of questions we didn't get to, but we had a lot of panelists I really wanted to get on this in this meeting, in this webinar. So we will, but I encourage you all, we'll be sending you a follow-up email. If you would like help connecting with any of the folks here you see on your screen, please reach out to us, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to connect with you. So thank you again for just taking some time in the end of your day to join us. This Farm Bill is very much not cooked yet. And so I want to encourage you all to continue to advocate on your behalves. The House, as Adam mentioned, the Senate Ag Committee recently closed their deadline for submitting their priority for receiving their priority recommendations, but the House of Representatives has not yet closed that window. And so following this webinar, tomorrow, please check your inboxes. We'll be sending out an email to all the participants with clear instructions on how you can voice your priorities to your representatives. And we will be sending you a list of the top priorities that we've identified as an organization that support this vision of justice for all in a fair farm bill. So with that, thank you. I just want to give one more sign of expression of gratitude to all of you for joining us, and especially to these panelists who just did a terrific job laying it out for you. So thanks, everybody, and have a great night.